What is up, everybody? This is your boy, your host, founder of Break Into the Future. This is super exciting. My big bro, Kurt, Kurt, the legend, been in the Bitcoin, blockchain, crypto space for almost a decade now. Super excited to have him on. Welcome, big bro. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me, Josh. I'm good. I'm above ground. I've got a happy, healthy family and two little children and all the opportunity in the world. So I'm good. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, yes. Thank you, man. I'm so excited. This is one of the guys that helped me break into the space in terms of just taking my call, getting on a call with me. He's a crypto legend. I call him a crypto legend. Just the influence he has in the space and the long amount of time he's been and seen the ups and the downs. So just tell the people who you are, background, how you got to this point today, when you broke into finding about Bitcoin, went in your little rabbit hole, and just give
Sure.
your spill.
So, so I got a longer story than most, but not certainly the longest story in the world. But 2012. Actually, we go a little bit before. I was a big gold advocate. I'm a big libertarian. Big advocate for sound monetary economics and free markets and all of that. I discovered Bitcoin in 2012 by accident. A guy that I didn't really know very well offered to pay me in Bitcoin at the printing company that I used to own to pay for some posters, like $50 for the Bitcoin.
Mhm.
And he told me it was like video game money. And I said, sure, you can pay me in this video game money.
So cool.
Mostly because I was curious. And so that's how my Bitcoin journey began. I can honestly say I didn't get it for, I don't know, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. I don't really remember now. If I look back at my Facebook timeline, I'm clearly talking about Bitcoin throughout 2013 with people.
Yeah.
So I've shared some screenshots on that in the past of me being the Bitcoin noob, which is really funny in the context that like spelling things wrong and asking dumb questions, the kind
Yeah.
of stuff that like I answer questions for people all the time now. But
Yeah.
it's fun to look back on. Maybe I'll share them with you if you want to like post them up on screen as I'm
I
saying
would
them.
love that.
So I'll find some of that. But
Yeah.
I got really into it. I was just like, man, we should be like, as a company, we should be mining it. Like, let's see if we can get our vendors to accept Bitcoin for payments and all this different stuff. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah.
I ended up getting into a small mining operation with a couple of partners in 2013, and then we didn't do very well. We were able to like we made some money, but it wasn't grand, and we closed that up in either late 2014 or early 2015, and just kind of said, well, we're not that good at this, and
Mm.
moved on. By that point, it was very much the what I recall as the beginning of the scaling war. I was a big blocker always. I was like, man, Bitcoin can do absolutely anything if we just have the willpower to push it.
Mhm.
And I thought that was pretty obvious, but a lot of people disagreed. And people were taking stuff out of the Bitcoin protocol. It was like, nah, we need to get rid of this for security's sake and just focus on it being digital gold and that kind of stuff, which really pissed me off. But it was around that time that I got into Ethereum and Monero mining separately because I could GPU mine, and I was like, oh, okay, this is easy. I'll see if I can earn a little bit of this stuff. I
Mhm.
liked the idea of like smart contracts, tokenization, and all that Ethereum offered. All that was cool. So I got into that for a bit. It was super passive. I wasn't really closely involved with things. Took a little bit of a break. I actually got married in 2015, so I had my own like honeymoon period away from Bitcoin for a little while.
Yes.
And late 2016 and into early 2017, I decided to get more active again. I basically hopped back into some of my old Facebook groups, and I realized that a number of them had grown quite a bit. And then I jumped into a group. I don't even remember how it started actually, but in early 2017, I joined a group that was called, I think it was just called Crypto Traders. And a guy reached out to me because I was just answering people's questions, just noobs, how do I secure my private keys? Just real basic stuff, the beginner kind of stuff. And I was just happy to answer to people. I was like, oh wow, there's a lot more people interested in Bitcoin now. Like this is exciting. After my little liaise a way to get married and all of that for a year and a half. I basically just didn't pay attention.
Yeah.
And so in 2017, I just started helping people like secure their private keys and just do all the stuff right as well as I could.
Mhm.
And this guy reached out to me. He was a trader. He was a professional stock trader and all the stuff. He's a really talented technical analyst named Matthew. And he said, "Hey, man, you clearly know your Bitcoin fundamentals really well. I don't. I know how to trade. I'd really like to start an educational group and take advantage of people being interested. And like, let's make sure that we teach people A, how to secure their Bitcoin properly, and B, how to manage their portfolio properly. So
Mm.
we won't be a signals group, but we will be an educational group, and we'll grow our reputation that way. And people will, just pay us money to consult on just doing stuff well." And I said, "Yeah, sure, what the hell." And so we started that in 2017. That's still cryptotraderspro.com is still out there. It kind of runs like a club today. There's a few hundred people that are just part of our private chat group, and we discuss all markets, all financials, all crypto related, everything, blockchain stuff, all kinds of other investment stuff. But it's more of a club of people that really like to work together and have powwows. So it's pretty cool. Then the Bitcoin Cash split happened. I was a big blocker, so I was very pro Bitcoin Cash. I took a gig with Bitcoin.com to run local meetups and stuff around Chicago,
Mhm.
which is where I'm from. It's where I still am.
Yeah, we were talking. We were discussing the Bitcoin Cash split, and you were at
Yep.
Bitcoin.com. I would love for you to explain what do you mean by big block? Can you explain?
Sure. Yeah. So Bitcoin Bitcoin is an accounting system more than anything. It's a cash system, but the way that it works is that there is a ledger of account that is distributed across the world.
Mm.
And there is a certain amount of transactions that can be broadcast to that network to be reconciled. That reconciliation period is roughly 10 minutes. It comes out to an average of 10 minutes. And each time there is a reconciliation, it is hashed using cryptography into a block. So they're just calling it's like a time block. There's not like a physical block anywhere or anything. It's more of a visualization. Is that there is a certain block of data, and it's not the data from an hour ago, and it's not going to be the data from an hour from now. It is this 10-minute block of data. The size of that block in the original Bitcoin protocol was not defined. So it could be a megabyte, it could be a gigabyte, it could be a terabyte. The network was immature, so it could not handle a gigabyte or a terabyte.
Yeah.
And people will debate today that it still probably cannot handle a gigabyte or a terabyte. That remains to be seen. But starting real early, there was a conversation about where that limit should be set. And some people, myself included, believe that limit should not be set arbitrarily in the rules. Like I should be allowed to try to propagate a gigabyte block if I want to. And if I fail, that's on me. I'm the only one that's lost. So why not let people try to do such a thing? But the more popular view today, the view that is common in BTC, is that 1 megabyte every 10 minutes should be a hard limit that nobody can get past. So that means 6 megabytes per hour is the top amount of data that can go across the BTC network globally, which is not enough for global finance or global settlement even. So it keeps Bitcoin in a very tight niche that it can only do this one simple thing. Now they say you can build all kinds of stuff around it and just use Bitcoin as a settlement layer. I don't like that idea because of the way that it's implemented. So I'm a big blocker in the sense that I believe that miners should choose by policy rather than a network wide rule. I think each individual node should say, I'm willing to try to do a 10 megabyte block or a 100 megabyte block or 100 gigabytes or whatever. It should be up to the emergent consensus or up to the free market of people who are providing the network resources to decide how big of a block they're willing to accept. And with that is, speed, perceived speed, the amount of total scalability and all of that. So
That makes
In
sense.
we don't really know what the practical limit of the Bitcoin network is because we haven't reached it. We haven't gotten to the point where the network
We can
like
test.
starts to go haywire because there's too much data going across it. So we just don't know.
Yeah, and I guess from that, and for the audience, and how we like I like explaining things. That was awesome. Just so if you're a crypto newbie, if unless you're a crypto wizard or a legend like yourself, wanting people to really learn when they come here. And so I guess what you're saying is, hey, we have this 1 megabyte cap, right? And I think the real reason why Satoshi Nakamoto created Bitcoin was for true decentralization, for true liberty for each individual in the world to be their own bank, their own node, true peer to peer across the world. And so I guess what you're saying is for BTC, if you're saying, hey, this is a capped amount of data you can put, it's kind of the network being centralized. It's kind of like they're saying what you can and can't. Like there's a cap on the
It is
store.
it's economic planning.
Yeah,
It is a
and
group of
central bank
people.
planning, central
Yes,
central data planning in a
pretty
sense.
much. I mean, it's protocol planning. It is a group of people that are setting rules that everyone else has to abide by inside the Bitcoin economy,
Mm,
and that's fundamentally not what Bitcoin was for.
yeah. Mm,
So Satoshi was very clear in the white paper and in conversation that honest nodes build blocks. That the way that Bitcoin is governed is by building blocks on other valid blocks. So you agree that the chain is valid by adding another valid block to it and
mm,
committing proof of work to that, spending your own money to secure the network, and then being rewarded in Bitcoins for that work.
mm,
And that narrative changed. It became, well, everyone should be a node. And it's like, well, that may be like everyone has the opportunity to be a node, but to be a Bitcoin node, the way Satoshi defined it, you need enough hash power to be able to practically build blocks, at least occasionally. You need to be able to contribute your proof of work to the network. And that's not how it works today. Most endpoints on the BTC network have never built a block. There's still to this day, there's only about 35 nodes on BTC that ever find a block at all. So there's 35 honest nodes on the BTC network, and there's probably something like 40,000 other endpoints that act as a sort of pseudo government. They signal their desires for the network, but they don't have any hash power. They can't build blocks. They're people that spent $60,
they're just
you
too
know, and
small.
they think they should have a vote, you know, and it's a very altruistic view of things, and I don't think Bitcoin works under altruism. I think Bitcoin is a very plainly capitalist construct, and this notion that one node, one vote, and the vote isn't by proof of work is kind of like the creeping communism into the network, frankly.
Hmm. Can you explain proof of work simply to the people?
Sure. So there's a computer science definition and there's a real world definition. The real world definition is the 25-year-old driving a Bugatti Veyron around town, right?
Hmm.
Pop pops out in a nice Italian suit. His shoes are always polished. His hair is done every once a week, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Gets out and you say, how does a 25-year-old? What is this? And the answer to that is proof of work. That he figured something out to live that life that way, and so those things are his proof of work. Now, your proof of work can also be your family or your children or the cleanliness of your household, or even you don't have to be wealthy to show proof of work either. Somebody, a guy walking around with big traps and a perfect chest and six-pack abs and all that, that's also proof of work. It's a different kind of work,
Yeah.
but that is proof of work. You can't fake that. Like,
Okay.
even with steroids and even with some stuff, you're still in the gym a lot. You are sweating your ass off. That's proof of work. That's really what that means.
Mhm.
In computer science terms, what it is it is a calculation based on the amount of money you're willing to burn to contribute power, energy. This is hash rate, is what they call it in Bitcoin, but truly, it's electrical computation cycles.
Mhm.
So, how much money are you willing to burn to vouch for the validity of the distributed ledger? Like, are you willing? How much are you willing to fight for it? Are you willing to burn $1 million and potentially fail in order to say that this is an accurate attestation of the state of the Bitcoin ledger?
Mhm.
And so that's expressed computationally um, as proof of work. They call it proof of work, and it's measured. It is a measurable aspect of the network. So a big node is contributing a certain amount of proof of work over time.
Mhm.
And what that is it just shows your dedication to the network. It shows your desire to fight for it. It shows that in some cases I'm willing to burn $1 billion and I'm getting rewarded for it. I'm not just losing money, obviously, but I am risking money. I'm risking the loss of money in order to protect the network. And so that's the most practical way to explain proof of work to somebody. So this is what miners are doing. This is a mining node or an honest node are some of the words that you'll hear used in Bitcoin. And that's how it's secured.
Yeah, that's awesome. What I have like so many questions, but I know I wanted we were at the bitcoin.com and your history getting up to this point. I would love for you to finish that. 'Cause
Sure.
we could go so many ways with going down the mining path. I think there's so many people there's been a lot of mining discussions, so that's been cool in the news, but I think that's one of the things for me or I'm learning a lot, but at least for maybe for the main, like the mainstream has no idea what mining is. Like, no, it's like digital mining, not like real mining. And so
Right.
we won't go down that today, maybe another time.
Sure.
But yeah,
Yeah.
Bitcoin.com, what happened with that?
Sure. So I hosted the Chicago Bitcoin Cash meetup sponsored by bitcoin.com for almost all of 2018. And then at the end of 2018, there became a debate again in the Bitcoin Cash community about whether or not we should have bigger blocks or smaller blocks. And I thought we were all big blockers, but it turns out we were not. The Bitcoin Cashers wanted to put another arbitrary cap on things, and me and some pals said, well, no, we're willing to fight you for it. And so there was a what was called the hash war of 2018. Bitcoin Cash split. From that emerged Bitcoin SV, and I became a Bitcoin SV supporter, despite the fact that I was being paid by Bitcoin.com. Not a lot, but there was some other stuff that we were in talks of me having a podcast and some other stuff at Bitcoin.com, and I had to say, guys, I love you, I appreciate you, but I disagree with the direction Bitcoin Cash has gone. So I'm gonna go with the BSV people. And the BSV people, their roadmap was we need to get rid of all limits. There should be no pre-planned limits to the Bitcoin protocol. We should let everybody compete on everything. It should be a general network that people are allowed to work on.
Hmm.
And so I became a big BSV advocate. Um, independently, I was working in cybersecurity at the time for work, and so I was always at my computer, anyways.
Hmm.
And it allowed me to be active on Twitter and Twitch. I became friends with the founders of Twitch right around when that launched, and it's a completely on-chain social network. It runs on BSV. It couldn't run on any other network because it doesn't have the bandwidth.
Mhm.
And after not too long, I got asked to do a debate against Peter McCormick, who hosts the number one podcast in Bitcoin, the What Bitcoin Did podcast,
Oh,
alongside Connor Murray, who's also a talented podcaster. And then on the opposite side, there was another guy who goes by the name Shinobi. He's an anonymous BTC advocate. And so we did a long debate on the Hotep Jesus podcast. And that was pretty fun. Hotep's a good guy. I still keep in touch with him, but that exposed me to CoinGeek. So the CoinGeek people, who at the time were the biggest miner on BSV, they own a news site, they own a bunch of different stuff. The editor in chief reached out and was like, "Hey, like you did a really good job on this podcast. You should be a CoinGeek guy." Um, I sort of resisted. Actually, I really liked my independence,
yeah.
and but they just kept asking, and I was like, hey, I mean, we're all friends. I don't disagree with you guys, but let's see. At some point, it's probably, I don't know, 6 or 9 months later, I finally agreed to take a freelance gig with them to write. So I started writing articles at CoinGeek.com, and then increasingly my articles became some of the most popular articles to read. And they were like, look, man, we want you to have like, we just want you full time. Like, we want you to be in the media team. We want you teaching about Bitcoin, the history of Bitcoin, how it works, answering questions for people. And so late last year, late 2020, I accepted a gig to go full time with CoinGeek.com. And now I am CoinGeek.com's chief Bitcoin historian. And I do a lot of podcast appearances, and I'm up on stage a lot. And I do, I have my own, the CoinGeek Weekly live stream. I do live Q&A. I do appearances, and I don't have any limits. Like, anytime it's like, well, can we touch on, I'm just ask me anything. I will answer any question you have. I don't care. Everything is my belief. If I don't know, I'll tell you I don't know. And that's the whole story. So
That's awesome.
here I am today.
Yes. Woo, clap it up. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks for that full 10-year almost history. I know we talked more than 10 years before we started, but that's really awesome. I know I tuned into some of the BSV conference.
Yeah.
How was that? Go into that.
Man, so it's my third CoinGeek conference. They're huge. I mean, it's hundreds of people working in the background. It's as big as any live production you've ever seen. So it's pretty much like being on a talk show, except it's 3 days, it's live, and it's 10 hours a day. Full crew, full broadcast team, all of that. VIP guests. There's important people everywhere. There's important people's assistants bouncing around everywhere. This one was in Zurich, Switzerland, which is the home of global banking for many generations now. And so there were a number of VIP Swiss banking clients there who wanted to learn what they could about the Bitcoin while we are in Zurich. And so that was also awesome and a little bit intimidating.
Yeah. Snipers.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it was interesting because there's so much knowledge there. I think there's this assumption that Bitcoin and banks are at odds with each other, that we're enemies or something, and I don't think that's the case at all.
Yeah.
I think that we have synergies that can absolutely create more value for each other. I think banks are an important feature in any functioning economy. I'm opposed to all kinds of bad central banking policy, but that's got nothing to do with real investment banking and real retail banking. And bankers that are in business to provide value to their clients have they have nothing but my support as long as they're doing their job right. So we talked about a lot of killer things behind the scenes, which is actually the best part, is having the ear of a CFO or a CIO or whatever at a 300-year-old Swiss bank, and discussing like, wow, we have this globally distributed ledger and we can tokenize all these assets, and you could be trading in, South Korea as easily as you can trade in South Carolina, and they're instantaneous either way. And they're like, oh my God, that's incredible. Like, I don't have to deal with Swift or ACH or, whatever else. Like, yeah, no, we can fix that. And it's like, bing, it's light bulbs everywhere. So that's super exciting. I was involved in hosting a bunch of things too. So I hosted a number of panels. I got to meet one of my heroes actually. So this guy, Ian Grigg. Ian Grigg is the creator of two predicate technologies that make Bitcoin possible. One of them is something that he worked with a couple others called triple entry accounting. This is like predicate, like how should a blockchain network be set up? But he wrote this paper like 3 or 4 years before Bitcoin existed. So he created a technology that required Bitcoin in order to really exist properly. It can exist without Bitcoin, but it's better with Bitcoin. And so that's pretty awesome. And then also the concept of Ricardian contracts, which is sort of a predicate technology that goes into doing smart contracts.
Yeah. See.
So he's a legend. He's a cypherpunk legend. He's a privacy legend. Like the guy's been, involved in advocacy for privacy, good cryptography, and sound money for decades. 20 years. So, with my cybersecurity background, like he's a guy that I would reference occasionally, and it's just like, man, Ian Grigg is super cool. I'd love to meet him someday. And I had breakfast with him in Zurich. So I was just like, total fanboy. And we talked about the problem with NFTs, like non-fungible token contracts, which you know, itself is a little bit of a difficult concept if you're a beginner. And then he was going into all the ways that they're wrong, and how the contracts need to be better defined, and property ownership. And I was just like
Yeah.
totally nerding out. Like it was like learning music theory from your favorite musician or something. It
Yeah.
was just it was fantastic.
Yeah. I just looked up an article that talks about Bitcoin.com. Like, is he the Satoshi? I know offline we talked about it a little bit.
Yeah.
Is he a public person? I mean, he
He
was at the
is.
conference, so I mean,
Yep.
yeah,
He's on Twitter. He'll respond to people that treat him nicely. He'll even respond to some people that don't.
yeah,
But yeah, he speaks at conferences. He's available on Twitter. He used to write blogs pretty regularly, but
mhm,
he hasn't done that so much lately. But he consults a number of blockchain projects actually, and if I recall, he was a co-founder of the foundation that created the EOS blockchain as well.
mm,
So he's that company was called Block One, and they
wow,
may not exist anymore. But Ian's been involved in a lot of stuff for a long time.
nice. Yeah, I might
Yeah.
have to have him on Break into the Future one day. Good reminder. I'm all
Be
about
incredible. He's a very good communicator too. I really appreciate Ian's
that. Yeah,
his candor, and just the timbre of how he handles things. He's a very good explainer, and he's a very nice person also.
that's awesome. Down to earth,
Mhm.
right? When you're a legend, that's down to earth.
Yeah.
That's like win-win.
Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Can we talk about just, I guess, just the different protocols that are being built? And so, right, these Web3, right, for everybody
Mhm.
listening, and we talked about it last episode, is really these new internets, right? We have one kind of system in Web 2, Web 1 and Web 2, that the great legends that created the internet, right? But they didn't get any value. So now we have Ethereum, these general all-purpose smart contract, like we have Ethereum, we have Cardano, we have BSV, we have these different things where you can build applications on top of them, right, for use. And so, can we talk about BSV, and what makes it different from the other ones, and just the landscape from your perspective?
Sure.
Landscape at first, and then like, okay, BSV. Why do you like BSV? What's your logic behind it, and where do you see it evolving as we're in like this middle part of maybe this cycle? Just talk about your thoughts of what's going on right now, and also the lay of the land, and like just like these new internets.
Sure. Absolutely. Um, so the shortest version is I think Web3 is basically fake news. Um, it
I love
the
this.
the way that it's envisioned today, like technology people have this altruism problem.
Yeah.
And I would that's the nicest way to put it. I think what they actually have is a communism problem.
Mm,
Everybody wants to have this mutual ownership of public properties, and that we all get to benefit from them, and then that's great because we're all nice to each other and information's free and blah blah blah.
mm,
And I come at it from a much more hyper capitalist, like, ownership matters.
yeah.
If something is
Libertarian.
is yes. So like if people don't own something, then it always falls victim to the tragedy of the commons eventually.
Mhm.
We see this in the oceans. Everyone's, how do we clean up the oceans? Like, well, who has a profit motive to clean up the oceans? Like, well, maybe fishermen,
Incentive.
maybe maybe whatever, but like a fishing company, even a big fishing company can't clean the whole ocean. So the problem is that nobody owns the damn thing.
Yeah.
And so there's no way to repurpose it for profit. So it's just this very disconnected, how do I do this for the benefit of the earth? It's going to cost billions of dollars
Yeah.
and no profit motive, except
Mm,
my grandkids may not die, and that's
mm,
it's too difficult a problem. I mean, it's a noble one. It would be noble for someone to spend billions of dollars to clean all the garbage out of the ocean, but it's not going to happen because this isn't how people work. People require incentives,
mm,
and just like you. So I mean, I'm a charity guy. I volunteer a lot of time at charities and church and all these different things, but but I can't donate all my time and I can't donate all my money, or else I can't do it anymore. And so I need to make very practical decisions with my life as to what things I do for profit and what things that I do for charity. And if the charity outstrips what I'm doing for profit, ultimately my family starves, we get homeless, my wife leaves me, and I'm this, then I'm the guy in the soup line, right? And that's not good. That would be
Yeah.
a net negative. That'd be a net negative both for me and for the culture as a whole, because I was helping people and now I need help, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
So there's a very similar problem in the way that people try to solve these problems, both with blockchain and just generally with this whole Web3 movement,
Mhm.
is that they want people to altruistically run a node, and what's your profit motive and all these different things. It's like, well, if you do it for profit, isn't it kind of in vain? Doesn't that cause corporations to then centralize, and then we're creating the same problems we had in the past?
Yeah.
And I would argue no, it does not. So we see this in consensus mechanisms too. This is why Ethereum is moving to a proof of stake model instead of proof of work. They don't like proof of work because proof of work is competitive. And the people that are planning the network are not competitive people. They look at it and say, I don't want to compete. I don't want to spend millions of dollars to upgrade infrastructure and hardware and these different things. And if we just do a proof of stake model, then we can do whatever. We can do whatever we want and it's fine.
And scale quicker,
And so,
all that.
what's that?
They want to scale quicker and all that, right? Is that part of it?
They want to scale without work, and that's a big problem for me. That just it doesn't work, unfortunately, because people's incentives aren't aligned. So if we look at every blockchain is either a fork of Bitcoin or it is a fork of Ethereum. Fundamentally, there are big differences between a number of them, uh, but they're fundamentally that. They're mostly that. They're an either or. There are two exceptions that I'm aware of. The one exception is Monero, which was coded from scratch and is a very different blockchain.
Yeah.
It's for high level anonymity and all of that. It doesn't scale very well. The second one is BSV. BSV is has been recoded from scratch. It is not a software fork of anything today. It is a UTXO or a ledger split, but it is not backported software to BTC or BCH or anything. It has been completely recoded, and it is a completely open competitive network. It is a communications network. It is a data network. It is a money network, and it doesn't have any practical limits. Now, everyone else, Dash, Litecoin, Digibyte, Peercoin, Potcoin, Redcoin, everything you got, these are all just derivations of Bitcoin Core, all of them. Some of them with some significant differences, but they still backport security updates and all kinds of things from Bitcoin Core. So none of them can scale. Like Ethereum is limited to 15 transactions per second globally. That's only about 2 times as many as BTC. Litecoin's only really capable of maybe 4 times as much as BTC. And then there's a whole bunch of other ones that are, in some ways better, but none of them are anywhere near what you need for global finance. So Bitcoin Cash is another one. It's good for maybe 200 transactions per second. If you go over to something like the Polygon protocol or some of these other things that are connected to the Ethereum economy, you got some people that are claiming like 1,000 to 10,000 transactions per second, but they're doing that by sharding. And what that is it's when you split your network database into a bunch of different versions. Like they're basically separate blockchains, and they validate things separately, and then they try to merge them back when they build a block in consensus. And so it's kind of a
whole bunch of like wires, and you like attach it at the end.
Yeah. And so you're kind of faking it. So what you're doing is you're saying, okay, there's 64 shards, and each shard can do 10 transactions per second. So it's 640 transactions per second. And that's our new number. But it doesn't scale well either, because it scales with complexity. It becomes exponentially more complex as you scale that up. And that's never good. You never want a system to get more complex,
And more
especially
right?
way more vulnerable. It's a
Yeah.
big problem.
Yeah.
And so then you have BSV, and BSV today is capable of somewhere between 25,000 and 50,000 transactions per second. That is on today's network. That somewhere in between those numbers, it'll start to get a little bit wonky, but that's because practical limitations in the current node implementation. Thankfully, in Zurich, we just saw the next generation node software called Terranode, which we expect. I mean, we saw it do 100,000 transactions per second in a live demo using 4 clusters, or 4 or 6. I forget if it was 4 or 6, but they move up linearly. So every time you move up, if you double the amount of clusters, you double the amount of throughput. So if it was 4 and it became 8, we're good for 200,000 transactions per second. And if we go up to 16, we're at 400,000 transactions per second.
Mhm.
And like I said, this is 16 nodes. This is 16 miners running these clusters. So if we had 100, then we're talking about probabilistically, we're coming up to something like 1 million transactions per second, while people like Ethereum are talking about 15 transactions per second. And so if you want to run data packets, if you want data to be able to propagate a network and settle across a global network and have access to all these people for financial transactions, Internet of Things, social media, streaming video, all the stuff we do, global banking, high frequency trading, all the bots, all the different stuff that the internet does, we're the only game in town. Nobody else has anywhere near the infrastructure. And anyone that says they do are lying, because we have all the patents. And nChain has about 1,000 patents. nChain develops the Terranode software and currently develops the node software for Bitcoin SV. And they own about 1,000 patents in the blockchain space, which is more than almost anybody. Alibaba and MasterCard also have pretty large patent portfolios, but they're sort of detached and disparate and doing different things. nChains are very focused on very practical uses in scaling, specifically in Bitcoin, but also in other systems.
Mhm.
And nobody can compete. Like we're at a point where, even though BSV is not particularly popular, we have so much technology and it is secured by so much intellectual property
Mhm.
that there's just not a way to practically pass us up. Like, you'd basically have to have a complete shift in the understanding of intellectual property law, and or buy it all from nChain, but it's certainly not for sale. So there's that, and the fact that just nobody is looking to create a network that does anything that BSV is capable of. So we have like the MetaNet protocol, for example, which is a replacement for the internet. And
Mhm.
what it is it's an overlay network that sits on top of Bitcoin and secures everybody's identities to their keys, and allows every action to be a transaction, or a broadcast transaction. It doesn't necessarily even have to be a financial transaction, but it allows for things like to get rid of DOS attack, all kinds of different types of Sybil attacks, and some of these other man in the middle kind of things that Bitcoin mitigates at scale because of the proof of work. And ultimately, proof of work secures the network from all kinds of the security concerns of the old internet and everything else. So my response to your question is that Web3 Web3 is mostly BS. It's a lot of hopes and dreams. Meanwhile,
What is the dream? What are they selling?
a network where Bitcoin miners replace the ISPs, or the ISPs are smart enough to become Bitcoin miners. So
Internet
your
service provider.
Verizons,
So the internet service
yes,
providers. Okay.
yeah, your Verizons, your Comcast, your AT&Ts of the world,
That would
your
be
your
pretty cool.
they're mining blocks, they are securing a global data network with proof of work, and it makes them that they have to be providing value, because if they don't do it, they lose money, and somebody else becomes
Not a
the
business.
center of the network.
Yeah. Hmm.
It's an incentive, a completely incentives based internet, where every aspect of the network is incentivized to create value for every other aspect, lest they be punished by the economics of the network itself.
But that's not happening.
Currently, no. Currently, there's government contracts that allow certain internet service providers pseudo monopolies over these rails, over the things that connect the internet. Truly, I am talking about replacing the infrastructure of the internet with Bitcoin, with the Bitcoin protocol in BSV, in order to make all interactions monetized and secured by proof of work.
That's you all's
It's
goal. That's BSV's goal.
Yes, all money, all data, all business, everything all on one network.
Wouldn't that be centralization though?
Is the internet centralized? Like we used one internet,
Yeah.
but what is one internet? That's the real question.
Yeah.
People don't realize that the internet is just a lot of people's computers.
Yeah.
Really, I mean
All
that's
coming
really all it
together,
is.
IP
Bitcoin's
address.
the same thing.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is just a bunch of computers. That's it.
On blocks.
Yeah, but they're playing by different rules. It's the rules of the game. So I'm gonna give a martial arts analogy.
Yeah.
I do Brazilian jiu jitsu, and we are an offshoot. We are a fork of judo. And the thing that makes judo different from jujitsu is the rules. They're the same sport. We choke each other, we throw each other, we go for you know joint locks, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But they look like very different sports because there's different rules.
Mm.
In judo, you can't grab the pants, you can't grab somebody by the legs. You win by getting a really clean throw. In jujitsu, doesn't matter. You can grab anybody anywhere you want. You can start from your butt if you like. The goal is to get them to tap out. It is a submission. And so they have evolved into two very different things. It's the exact same thing with the internet. The internet is just a communications protocol. It's TCP/IP and a bunch of different protocols all stacked on top of each other that have a bunch of game theory that make it work the way that it does.
Mm.
Bitcoin's the same thing. Bitcoin is just a communications network, and we've decided that these units that it sends, rather than just simple data packets like on the internet, the data packets are money. They're digital pieces of money that we send as packets of data across the network. And so it makes it competitive. It makes it secured. There's a bonus if you help that money move well across the network. And then that's huge. So it just you change one rule like that and say, well, now it's all monetized. You get very different behavior. This is why there's a big difference between Singapore and the Soviet Union. Like 100 years ago, they looked quite similar. They were both very rural, very not much going on. The Soviet Union, for 100 years basically was not doing much. Like they had industrial powers, but people were still starving. And Singapore became a global tech and finance center. And, it's one of the richest places in the world. And so it's incentives. Incentives matter. They matter very, very deeply.
Yeah, it's like the NBA, right? Everybody wants to be an NBA player because, hey, look, say no more,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Interesting. So BSV has all these thousands of patents. The proof of work is there, right? You're throwing great conferences. You have all these stats. Why doesn't the mainstream of at least the cryptoverse know about this? All the traders. Why is the market cap only at 2 billion? And why, if we have these TSP, transactions per second, so high versus everybody else, the other protocols, why isn't this on Front Street? And how do you get to be that? Oh, we want to be that number one.
Two things. The first one is we're an existential threat to everybody. So everybody circles the wagons and says we're not real. Like we're just lying. None of that's real. The patents aren't real. The companies aren't real. The people aren't real. BSV is a scam. BSV doesn't. It's all just made up. So there's a big PR campaign against us on that front. The second one is that a lot of people have staked a lot of reputation on the fact that Bitcoin can't do these things. This is why BTC is the way it is. And there's been a big move from big venture capital firms to keep Bitcoin very small. And the reason is these venture capital firms are also invested in very interesting fintech businesses that they want to exist. So there's a lot of money being Coinbase or Abra or Kraken or Lightning Labs or BitGo or Fireblocks, all these different companies that provide all these services under the assumption that Bitcoin doesn't work. Billions of dollars are made by companies like Coinbase for exactly that reason. Like, oh, since Bitcoin doesn't work very well, spend your Bitcoin with this Visa card and we'll only charge you 2% and blah, 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 blah. Well, they're trying to become
the old way. They're trying to make this is the in between, like the central and decentralized. Like, yeah, because they're not really crypto based companies. They're not built on a blockchain. They're just like,
they're a bank.
Coinbase is a centralized exchange. That's really a bank.
Right.
Think about it. My Coinbase card is literally coming in a few days.
Mhm.
Um,
And that's and you use it just like you'd use one from Chase or Bank
yeah,
of America. It's not any different. It's like, here's your BTC as your savings account and spend it on your Visa card. And that's it. That's their whole business model.
yeah,
And then they're making a big spread on people doing the exchanges and this and that. So there's a lot of money in doing that. And BSV makes their entire business model obsolete. All of it. So there's a reason that Coinbase doesn't list BSV. Ah, it's a scam. We would never do that.
to that point, it seems like a good step change. Like, oh, people aren't ready to like just go completely bankless, completely like have a digital wallet, completely have one a hot wallets and a cold wallet, which we can get into maybe not this episode. Um, but what do you think about in terms of these like middlemen of like the old and new system? Do you think it's since Web3 is like, oh, they're not really about the proof of work life, right? And they're about staking. Can you give your thoughts on the future since it's breaking to the future? In
Yeah.
5, 10 years, are we really like a true, hey, Kurt Joshua can be his own bank, a true sovereign, right? Or are we still in this old system? Are we stuck in this in between, right? And then can you explain what proof of stake and work is?
Yes, I may have to run here. I may have another meeting I just asked about. So if I have to jet, we can continue at some point in the future. But
We can cap
so
it.
for me, going 5, 10 years in the future, here's the thing. Um, we have we don't trust each other anymore. And the reason we don't trust each other anymore is, I mean, just look at the news. Like uh Russian bots. There's all everything's fake news. Now we have Facebook and Twitter. Oh, would like this isn't real. This isn't real vaccine information. This isn't real political information. You're not allowed to share this. You're not allowed to question these things. And it's like that's all well and good if you're of the same political opinion as Facebook or Twitter. Then you're inclined to say, well, I like Mark Zuckerberg and his politics, and therefore I'm in favor of this sort of broad brush censorship and that kind of thing. And that's a real problem. It's a problem that we can't trust data. And I've actually written about this quite a bit. One of the first times I wrote about it was actually in regards to climate science. Like we can't agree whether or not the world is, there's global warming or not. So that's the first step. There are people that believe that it does not exist, and there are people that believe that it does exist. And then if you believe that it does exist, then you have the second question: is human stuff causing it, or is this some kind of natural cycle and humans are part of this natural cycle and there's nothing really we can do about it? And we have tons and tons of data, but we're not willing to trust anybody's data. So if you're a Republican, you're not willing to trust the data that comes from a Democrat scientist. And it's like, okay, then that's not science. Now we're having a religious conversation, really. And
Opinion.
that's terrible.
Yeah.
And then there are multiple cases of actual malice or actual incompetence in losing that data. Like, the data says this. And it's like, no, it doesn't really say that. Or maybe it did, but it got lost, and blah, 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 blah. So Bitcoin at scale allows for things like that data to be stored permanently in aggregate in a way that it can't be lost or tampered with.
Yeah.
And then it allows us to have data that we can agree on. Even if I'm a hyper socialist and you are a CEO of a hyper capitalist bank, and we don't have to say, well, your data was paid for by blah, blah, blah. It's just data. It's data that nobody can tamper with. So now we can have more valuable conversations, and we can make policy based on actual data that we don't have to agree on. I may not like the data, but the data is true, and that's it. So this is the truth. So rather than fighting about opinions, then we can now have opinions on ways to solve problems with the truth. And so that changes everything. Like that changes absolutely everything. That changes the face of politics and culture and government. It allows us to do business in such a way that we can have smaller government entities because we don't need broad brush, 300, there's 300 and what, 350 million people in the United States. Like Joe Biden's supposed to represent us all to the world. Like half the country doesn't like the guy at all. Like
Yeah.
they think he's an illegitimate president, but he gets to make a bunch of decisions. It's like, if it was more practical for us to be in smaller, self-governing and cooperative government units, like states,
Yeah,
but
well,
imagine if the states were more sovereign, then using this global economic tool like Bitcoin, people can more practically govern themselves. We can keep making government smaller and smaller, more and more obsolete, and more efficient. Like, this is not just about making small government; it's about making things so efficient that the government seems silly, or that the legacy banking system seems silly. And when those things seem silly, that's when they really change.
mhm,
And so, Bitcoin in 10 years, man, if we don't fail at this, like, we are going to change everything, every aspect of politics, culture, religion, economics, business, borders, everything. Bitcoin changes everything at scale.
mhm. The fight to get to the efficient scale and the right.
Hmm.
We'll see. Thanks, big bro. Kurt, big Kurt. Thanks, man, for your time. We'll have to do another one, man. I know you got to hop. I do too. So
Yeah,
yeah, man, you have a great rest of your day, weekend, and we'll talk soon, man.
sounds good, man. I appreciate it. I've had a lot of fun. I had a lot of energy today, so I'm glad I was able to get it out here.
Yes, yes, definitely.
So
I'm glad Break into the Future can help you with that.
awesome.
All right, man.
And good luck with everything. I'm glad to see what you're doing too. So keep it up, keep kicking ass.
Get it.
Don't take shit from anybody.
Limitless. Let's
Yeah,
get
man.
it. Thanks, man.
Hell yeah.
Peace.
Peace.
All right, guys, you heard it. Kurt, big Kurt Wartick Jr. You could find him on Twitter, Kurt Wartick Jr. I'll put it in the edits. And then, yeah, this was awesome. This is super cool, super OG. He's a crypto legend. He's at BSV. You can look him up on CoinGecko.com. And you can look him up on CoinGeek.com. He's the editor-in-chief historian. He's always has appearances. You can just look him up on YouTube. So, hey, Break into the Future, share this with your friends and family. We're putting you on game to everything future: crypto, blockchain, electric vehicles, solar, cannabis, robotics, AI, technology, anything, teleportation. Hey, if you think you know the future, come on this show. We're exposing it all here. Let's get it. Love you guys.